Hello there, and many thanks for joining us on this fresh edition of Business Week, the program that brings you top business stories that made the headlines during the course of this week, including special news features, interviews, market data, and much more. Welcome to the show. Here's the highlight of the biggest stories we tracked for you over the course of this week. Now, on the local front, fuel scarcity worsened in Lagos, the Federal Capital Territory, and other parts of the country over the course of this week, causing motorists to spend long waiting hours at filling stations. The total non-performing loans in the banking sector hit 1.21 trillion naira as at the end of February this year, and that's according to the latest report from the Central Bank of Nigeria. And now in aviation-related matters, the International Air Transport Association has expressed concern over the decision by the federal government of Nigeria to block foreign airlines from repatriating ticket sales revenue running to $450 million into their respective countries. And on the international front, global investment and financial firm Goldman Sachs has already projected a 30% chance of the U.S. economy tipping into recession over the next year, up from its previous forecast of 15%, amid the record high inflation and weak macroeconomic backdrop fueled by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And the EU is also set to temporarily shift back to coal to cope with the dwindling Russian gas flows without derailing longer-term climate goals. Well, that's according to EU officials as a tight gas market and soaring prices set off a race for alternative fuel. Russia is also increasing gasoline and naphtha supplies to Africa and the Middle East as it struggles to sell fuel in Europe, while Asia is already taking bigger volumes of Russian crude. That's the latest from Refinitiv data. Well, it's now time to bring you special packages prepared by our correspondents.
From findings by TVC News, motorists queued for hours at filling stations in different parts of Lagos, struggling to buy fuel. Some of them spend as much as 6 hours or more at fuel stations to get petrol. Most filling stations were seen dispensing fuel to customers while others remained short. This situation prompted some persons to be selling and buying petrol at the black market.
Let's get our refineries working. You can see the windfall we are supposed to be enjoying from Ukraine-Russia war. We are not benefiting from it. Rather, it's becoming a cost for us because we are exporting crude and bringing refined product back home. So it's a simple arithmetic. There's no way you can profit that way.
NNPC and those in charge should do well to supply to all filling stations so that they can be able to dispense to customers freely and easily.
Everything is crumbled. Most of us can't even buy diesel again. We use fuel to power generator. So you go into the office, no light, no fuel to on your generator. So what business? No business.
Recently, the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, IPMAN, explained the reason for the fuel scarcity in Lagos and other parts of the country. The marketers insist that the business environment has become hostile, hence they can no longer sell petrol under the present conditions.
The failure of the system. And by this I mean, ordinarily, our members are supposed to be serviced by NNPC through their depots. But these depots have not functioned in the last 8 months, right? And because of this, we have to contend with dealing with private depots. But of recent, the private depots have at their prices such that the template given by government can no longer work with our members. So the decision of our members to shut their station is just personal business decisions of various marketers.
The shortfall that we experience, and our members, we could not have anything. We cannot complain for anything because we can only pick the product that are available. If the product that are not available, we can't. But we are waiting. We are standby. When the product is available, everybody.
Though the Nigerian government still pegs the price of PMS at 165 naira, many of the marketers insist that the landing cost of product is about 185 naira. Many Nigerians are still suffering from this scarcity, and they hope the federal government will yield to the demands of the marketers or find a lasting solution to the problem. Sharon Ijason, TVC News, Lagos.
Despite the genuine effort of government to create a favorable business environment, it is disturbing to note, however, that the challenges being encountered by businesses are sometimes direct results of the policy formulations and bureaucratic bottlenecks created by government agencies, constituting a clog to the economic progress of the country. In its quest to play a leadership role in the integrated marketing communication subsector, the Advertisers Association of Nigeria, ADVAN, has brought together industry practitioners and experts to a business dialogue to discuss the role of government regulations in the ease of doing business.
It's an ongoing conversation, and we'll go hand in hand with the regulators, we'll go hand in hand with whoever is involved in our businesses to make sure we are doing business the proper way, the right way, and it's easy for us to do.
What I will say is engagement is not a once in a year activity. Engagement and collaboration with regulatory bodies should be continuous. And I would also mention is that government must engage the private sector before even these policies are brought to the public as policies.
For these regulators, the need to foster collaboration for improved regulations is key to the growth of the economy and the private sector.
What came out for me today is that there's need for further engagement and collaboration. You have a tripod, you have the advertisers, you have the advertising agencies, and you have the regulator. And I can see that it's a threefold cord. Two sides seem to be kind of happy and aligned. One side isn't so happy. So that means that there's more discussion that needs to be had.
Today's event is well noted. It brings to bear the importance why we need to let businesses run smoothly, because businesses are in it for profit and we must help them make profit. As regulators, we must provide an enabling environment for business to flourish. When the business is flourishing, they are profitable, they can pay taxes and continue to be in existence.
With the conviction that the Nigerian consumers are the ultimate beneficiaries of a friendlier business climate, continued dialogue between the public and private sector will no doubt improve on the dynamics of ease of doing business in the interest of all stakeholders and the ultimate consumers. Blessed Omonose, TVC News, Lagos.
This is the second annual Seafarers Colloquium, and this year's event plays host to a gathering of Merchant Navy officers, Water Transport Senior Staff Officers Association, and the Maritime Workers Union of Nigeria. Exploring the theme, Nigeria's Certificate of Competence is Global Acceptability, Challenges and the Way Forward. Participants question the non-marketability of Nigeria's seafarers.
We keep on pressing the government, the MASA, to make sure that this COC issue is being resolved. It's just a matter of putting the right structure in our maritime institution, then have maybe training vessels, then maybe IMO will come and do inspection and approve what they are giving us is not OOW Unlimited. And that hinders us. It limits us because they are limiting us. Most of the tickets we have is NCV.
This will bring in back all these liquidated vessels of the past when we're having close to 39 vessels. What are those vessels? You'll be sending our children for training, both men and women. So when they pass out of the schools, where are they? No employment.
Underscoring the need for immediate action, they note that beyond training cadets abroad, government and most especially NIMASA should do more to drive compliance to the cabotage policy as it affects Nigeria's seafarers.
So most of the vessels working here are cabotage vessels, and we doesn't have access to work on those vessels with our certificate because they felt the flag state doesn't recognize our certificate. And how do we do it? A serious government will let every vessel that is coming to its own country to make sure that they recognize our certificate.
Go to Ghana. This cabotage regime you're talking about are well respected over there. But in our country here, we let loose. So NIMASA still have a long way to go.
Their argument is that there are a lot of job opportunities in the Nigerian maritime space, but these opportunities have to be harnessed. Ifunanya Eze, TVC News, Lagos.
And now we have the feature on the show today as we take a critical look at Nigeria's rising debt profile. We'll definitely bring you details of this and much more after this break. Don't go anywhere. Many thanks for still staying with us. Let's now deal with the crux of today's discourse. Nigeria's debt servicing bill has increased by 109% to hit 896.56 billion naira. As a result, the country has also spent 3.83 trillion naira on debt service and payments in 15 months, according to data obtained from the Debt Management Office. Now, while a total of 2.93 trillion naira was spent on debt service and payments in 2021, a total of 896.56 billion naira was spent in the first quarter of this year. Meanwhile, between October and December last year, Nigeria spent 310.5 billion naira on domestic debt servicing, while it also spent $286.35 million, which is an equivalent of 118.9 billion naira on external debt servicing, giving a total of 429.4 billion naira. Well, joining me to discuss this and more, I have Mukhtar Mohamed, the Chief Executive Officer of Finance with Mukhtar. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
My pleasure, David.
Well, let's now start off with this alarming rise in debt service bill of Nigeria. This phenomenon continues to spike further as the DMO also reports this has increased by 109% to hit 896.56 billion naira just for the first quarter of this year. How problematic would you describe this phenomenon?
David, it's very problematic. If you remember, a long time ago, I've been shouting about our debts to revenue, which has always been my own challenge. But the government kept telling us about debt to GDP. And like I said then, and I'll say it again, you cannot use GDP to pay off your debt. You need to use revenue to pay off your debt. So and when you look at our revenue then and our debt profile, and even the finance minister have come out to say that it's even difficult for us to even meet our obligation of even paying civil servant salary, talk less of paying for our debt. So it's really a very pathetic situation that we are now, especially when you look at the crisis all over the world, the inflation that is beginning to bite all over the world. So it's a very, very bad stage we are now at the moment. When you look at our debt profile, it's something that calls for concern. And before we used to say it calls for concern, but now I think it's something that we have to be worried about.
Okay, now, to what extent do you also see a turnaround between our revenue to debt base, the conversation around exploring tax to reduce borrowings and address the current debt levels isn't as simplistic as it sounds? How do we begin to explore out-of-the-box tax strategies and not necessarily overburden the average Nigerian whose pocket is already weighing too heavy?
Thank you, David. I've been saying about this government, and not only this government, previous government. Nigeria are not flowing with the times. The times that we are in is using tax as a means of attracting growing your economy, not just for revenue, because by the time you are able to use tax to grow your economy, then you begin to see revenue flowing into your economy. And this revenue is going to come in place of, it's going to just come in case of the companies paying tax. Also, the people that they will employ also be paying tax. But what we see in our government is when you talk about widening the tax bracket, what they do is to go back to businesses and begin to put more tax on the business and more tax on people, especially as it is now. Now, how do you go about not burdening, but putting more tax burden on the people? It's also for you to begin to look at most ingenious ways of attracting businesses and giving them tax bracket. Remember, tax bracket only comes in the profit of those businesses. It does not affect those businesses' debts. I mean, the employers of those businesses themselves. So we need to begin to look at that and begin to say, look, is there a way out of these challenges? The way out is for government to begin to look revenue as a means to grow the economy and tax as a means to grow the economy, and then in turn begin to attract revenue. And so for now, when you look at what we are trying to do, we are trying to look at tax to put more burden on the average Nigeria. So when you mean of government thinking out of the box? Government thinking out of the box is beginning to look at sectors that are key drivers of the economy and begin to see how you can grow those sectors and attract more people into those sectors. And those people that you attract into those sectors will pay more tax, will pay tax, and that will increase your revenue. So you are looking at tax as a means of growing your economy, not looking at tax as the only means of bringing revenue into your economy. So for me, that is the major challenge that we are facing now with government.
Let's also now look at what's your forecast for the debt to GDP ratio playing pundit here for this year now. And how do you also see this also shaping up the tempo for the economic performance of the next government administration? For some, this is not necessarily a clean slate because at the end of the day, you have to deal with the backlogs that have already persisted. So for the new government, it's quite difficult to maneuver through. Your thoughts on this?
I think the incoming government, no matter who, whether from the ruling party or from the opposition party, we have an Herculean task in terms of growing the economy, not even talking about paying debts that are there. And when you talk about, I think the incoming government should begin to look at our debt profile via revenue if they really want to come out of the challenges that they will meet when they come into government. Because every part in the world now, governance is beginning to look at debt to revenue, not debt to GDP. And then we have that revenue challenge. So we shouldn't be looking at the revenue, the GDP as a means. Now we should go back and begin to look at what is our revenue to our GDP. Now, if you look at it now, recurrent expenditure, how much tax do we have being paid from recurrent expenditure that is governing about a large percentage of the budget? So those are what we need to begin to look at. How do we attract investment to grow our revenue using this tax? Because tax is a very key in growing any economy. Look at the United States of America. The government is thinking of removing petroleum tax so that the bottom people will begin to enjoy a little bit of freedom, especially with the kind of inflation that they are getting. Those are the way government begin to think. You begin to look at tax as a means of helping your people either to grow the economy or moving a lot of people out of the poverty level. So, and you talked about the telecom sector that you just said. Now, you say every make call now you have to pay tax on it. Our fee as regard the calls. And you said, no, they cannot do that. Then within some couple of days, you were then putting us to pay tax also to begin to act as a means of having a health insurance for the most vulnerable. Rather in developed country, when you want to do that, you look at the rich and you begin to tax the rich to pay for the health insurance of the vulnerable. So there's a lot that the incoming administration would need to do, especially in the area of revenue and especially in the area of debt. They should be looking at how long do we want to keep borrowing? How can we begin to use our project as a benchmark to instead of us going for revenue, going for debt to do most of this infrastructural project? Can we put this infrastructural project as our own what we bring to the table and begin to tell them, look, you finish this project in the next 25 years, in the next 20 years, begin to pay what you generate from this project will be what we used to pay off the debt. And so I think that is where every government is at the moment, especially with the scarce resources that is at every government disposal as it stands now.
And wrapping up now, do you really think Nigeria has any chance at cutting the current debt levels? Analysts' predictions of the debt levels and solutions that we could possibly explore sometimes seems a little out of reach in terms of how practical and implementable government can run with these solutions.
David, this present government, I don't think so. Because up till now, they were still thinking of borrowing. Until recently, I don't think that this present government is looking at that. I think the incoming government will be the one that will begin to look at that. But the current administration, I don't think they are looking at that. Because again, like you pointed out, the major challenge in Nigeria is the recurrent expenditure. And when you look at recurrent expenditure, you look at political appointees. They are the ones that are really getting a lot from the recurrent expenditure. How do we bring down the cost of governance? Why do we have two specific media advisors to the president? Why do we have two media advisors to the vice president? Why do we have a lot of things we need to look into and begin to look at the cost of governance? Why is the National Assembly having the members of National Assembly also have their own key staffs? Why? How can we reduce the cost of governance? And it takes a leader with a lot of political will to do that. And I, for one, was thinking that this present administration, especially with the goodwill that it came into power, would have been the administration that would have been able to work on this. But unfortunately, it seems that it's business as usual. So for me, the problem is, will government take a bite? And then when you're talking about government take a bite, would they be able to take a bite in the area of political appointees? Not just beginning to look at, want to reduce the cost of governance or want to reduce the number of civil servants. I think when you look at how much it comes to the civil servant and how much you pay to these political appointees, you realize that most of the chunk of the recurrent expenditure goes to political appointees. And if you talk about political appointees, then you begin to look at our political class. How much do they mean well for the ordinary Nigerian? So basically, if we want to reduce it, we have to go down to the cost of governance. And just like you said also in the report, like we said also when we're talking, the Minister of Finance has been saying now we even borrow to pay salary. So it's something we need to look inwardly and begin to act fast before we don't turn to another Venezuela.
Thank you so much for your time on the show today, Mukhtar Mohamed.
Thank you, David.
Just before we go now, here are graphic details of selected food price watch for the month of May 2022 as prepared by the National Bureau of Statistics. That's it on this edition of Business Week. Many thanks for watching so far. Do have a wonderful weekend. I'm David Alabi. Bye for now.